What if Doctor Who wasn't axed in 1989? Well, that's a question I've been trying to answer for about 4 years, and we're nearly at the end. Currently we're in the mid-2010s as we grow ever closer to the present day, based now purely on 25 years of detailed, complex and convoluted canon to follow, each decision to the next through cause and effect. Let's find out what the next season has in store, thanks to a lot, and I mean a lot, of guesswork. The beginning of this season was covered in the previous video. To see episodes 1 to 7, including the Xmas Special, please click on the card to watch it. Thank you. Now without further ado, let's get on with the rest of the season. This episode is almost entirely told in flashbacks and revolves around Pete. He uses the framing device of the Doctor, Sally and Pete in the middle of an adventure where they discover that a race called the Memorphians are behind whatever they are investigating. However, Pete recognises them and says he's encountered them before, years ago, before he even met the Doctor. This episode sees him recounting that tale through flashbacks of the Doctor and Sally before, with the information they have, they defeat the Memorphians at the end of the episode, so it's kind of a Doctor Light episode. Over the episode, Pete recounts the story of how, when he was at work almost 10 years earlier, his colleagues at his supermarket all started acting very strangely, like they weren't focused at all. He began investigating, and over the episode he uncovers more and more, and somewhat of a conspiracy all around his supermarket, the management, and the competition with a rival supermarket. Pete starts becoming obsessed with finding out what's going on, and he becomes convinced that it's aliens, while everyone else, including his wife Val, thinks he's mad and just seeing patterns and things that aren't there. Pete ends up discovering that the Memorphians are replacing the brains of their supermarket workers with their own to firstly take over their bodies and secondly become the best supermarket in England. Pete runs away initially before contacting the police and telling them everything before they chuck him in a cell for breaking and entering. However, when he's in the cell he gets a visit from Kate and Ryan, who tells him that everything he's found out is real, but he needs to keep it quiet and Unit will deal with it from now on. She then gives Pete a pill, which erases the last week of his memory selectively, so he can't remember what's happened, before Caitrin leaves and we see Unit sort out the Memorphians. Peter explains to Sally and the Doctor that seeing them again must have triggered his brain, because he couldn't remember the incident initially at all, and 4 aliens didn't exist when he first met the Doctor. The episode is mainly played out as a comedy though, and it explores Pete's personality and his life before the Doctor, as well as seeing his wife again. This is the first episode to have him properly front and centre since he was introduced, and the Doctor and Sally only really appear in less than 15 minutes of the episode. This episode sees the Doctor, Sally and Pete landing on a planet not too dissimilar from modern day Earth, with only a slight advancement, as far as the eye can see, in the technological level from about sort of 30 years in our future. The Doctor says this planet is light years away and far into the future though, as a free go to explore. The Doctor tells them that she's picked up some strange readings from this planet, readings that shouldn't exist anymore. The three explore and get involved in a pretty generic murder mystery plot, with one of the locals whose husband has been killed. However, during the course of this investigation, the plot is hijacked as the Doctor runs into Riley, now the CEO of the company the victim was working for. It then turns out that the planet they're on is the Elysium, Toyota 3, Riley's home planet, but in the far future from the planet we know from the show The Elysium. It then turns out that Riley's company is a front for the government-controlled institute which is trying to avert the Vex invasion of this universe. The Doctor tells her that is impossible. It was tried before, but only a new timeline was created. Riley laughs, telling the Doctor that's why it's taken them so long. They're trying to find a solution to that problem, and they've nearly cracked it. Throughout the rest of the episode, the murder is solved, and as it turns out the victim was involved in some sort of dodgy business with the company, and Riley ordered his execution. Riley tries to have the Doctor, Sally and Pete killed, but they manage to escape from the planet and back into the TARDIS home. However, the episode spends its final 6 or 7 minutes with Riley and Lord Hanson as they perfect the new time travel process, and then they mention they wouldn't have been able to do this without the most generous sponsor. We then hear a very familiar voice say, "I'm glad I'm finally able to rectify the sins of my past, at last," before we cut to the end credits. This episode takes us back to Beesmere for the final story before the two-part finale, and of course Sally reunites with her family, Annie and Jade. The main villain in this episode is again Oliver Griffiths, and once again, as he's back in the village on his election campaign, as he's Beesmere and Orsindale's MP. Of course, he couldn't have picked a worse day to show his face as the Doctor, Sally and Pete have just arrived. The first half of the episode sees the Doctor, Sally and Pete and Annie investigating Griffiths, as he seems like he's up to something again, including a couple of confrontations with him at his speeches before the episode is turned on its head halfway through, when it's revealed that Griffiths is doing something, but something completely different to what they thought. He tells the Doctor that he's on a journey of self-discovery, and he has to find out who he is. Griffiths explains that he thinks aliens have tampered and manipulated with his life, and he says he needs the Doctor's help. For the rest of the episode, the Doctor and co join forces with Griffiths as they investigate his past, as well as anything going on at the minute alien-wise, which could be involved. Eventually they find a lead at Griffiths' old cottage in the village, where in the cellar they find a chest with the seal of Rassilon inscribed. The Doctor becomes deathly cold, as she begins to work out what's happened. She tells Griffiths not to open it under any circumstances, and it turns into a large argument between the two. The Doctor ramps up and tears apart Griffiths for all the terrible things he's done, but she also accidentally ends up admitting in the argument that he's probably one of her people, a Time Lord, inside his consciousness. The Doctor also says she has a terrible feeling she knows which one he is, the Master. Against the Doctor's wishes, Griffiths goes ahead and opens the chest anyway. Time Lord energy spits out and smothers Griffiths as he absorbs it, and then he comes to life. The Doctor cautiously says the Master's name, asking whether it worked, to which he just laughs and says he loves it when the Doctor's completely wrong. The Doctor asks who he is then, before he says, with wondrous joy, that she should have worked it out by now. It was obvious. He says that he was even a rather corrupt politician with less than zealous morals. The Doctor gasps as the penny drops. She whispers, "The Rogue." To which he smiles and says, "Hello, Doctor. You've sure changed a bit." Still flabbergasted, the Doctor is frozen as the Rogue moves around the cellar to open a secret compartment in the wall, and inside a TARDIS. He tells the Doctor that he really must be going now, as he was in a spot of bother before, and he really has to deal with it. The Rogue's TARDIS dematerialises before we cut to the TARDIS back in Sally's living room, explaining to everyone, and the Chapter 4 audience, who exactly the Rogue is. She then says that she needs to find him, and see what he's up to, and what business he's attending to. She tells Sally and Pete that it might be dangerous, but without hesitation they both say yes, as then they leave in the TARDIS, and we cut to end credits. This episode begins with us seeing the Rogue's point of view, or the final scene of The Last Winter, whereby we pick up Lord Hanson and Riley, and we get the impression it's been some time between this scene and the last episode. We then cut to the titles before we pick back up with the Doctor, Sally and Pete in the TARDIS, as the Doctor tries to get a trace on the Rogue's TARDIS but fails. She says she's going to have to consult with an expert, to which Sally and Pete say that anyone who knows anything about TARDISes are dead, to which the Doctor solemnly says, all of them, but one, as she sets the TARDIS into flight. The episode follows 3 different storylines throughout. Firstly, the Rogue, Riley and Lord Hanson. Secondly, the Doctor, Sally and Pete searching for the Rogue. And thirdly, a story following Unipishtim and the Free on Toyota 3 from the spin-off show The Elysium. For the majority of Part 1, these 3 plots are separate, but they all come together for the cliffhanger. To make this more understandable, I'll be going through each one by one, beginning with the Doctor, then Unipishtim, then the Rogue, but they'll all be happening at the same time, interspersed with each other in the show. So, the Doctor, Sally and Pete land on a murky, raining planet, before the Doctor takes them to the tower in the middle, where she says an old friend is waiting for her. Inside, the building looks abandoned and mouldy. They explore, digging deeper into the lower levels. All seem to be very old science labs. They come to one with a noise coming from inside, the sound of a saw, and sparks around. And then we see the Rani, now played by Michael Hogan. The first few scenes between the two are dubious, as the Riley doesn't want anything to do with the Doctor, especially as he thought she was dead, not knowing about her resurrection after Endgame. We find out that he decided to retire to Miasmagoria and just focus on science. The Doctor manages to win him round to help track the Rogue's TARDIS, which he does before the Doctor, Sally and Pete leave in peace and head to intercept the Rogue's TARDIS. On Theatre 3 we follow Unipishtim, a mysterious character from the spin-off The Elysium, in the Free Secret Base. He has a conversation with a new recruit in the organisation, Keo, and during it a word triggers him and affects him in an unexpected way, causing past memories to flood around him. This leads Unipishtim to enter the restricted section of the Free's private library, where he finds multiple historical documents about the past, most inscribed with the seal of Rassilon. As he starts reading one of the books, Shamash, another elder, comes up behind him and tells him that he should stay away as the past has to be buried. But Unipishtim breaks down in front of Shamash and tells her that it was all his fault, and if it wasn't for him, their people would not have been destroyed. Unipishtim and Shamash decide that they need to talk to the first founder of their organisation, Isaiah, who is locked in a cell at the deepest part of the structure, hidden away. She's completely mad, but the two have a conversation with her and says that all three of them may have changed their faces and may have changed their names, but that doesn't mean they can't run away from their crimes any longer. Finally, the Rogues plot with Hanson and Riley sees them on the far future version of Theatre 3, which we last saw in episode 9, picking up from the final scene of that episode where the Rogue says it's time for them to reverse the sins of his past. However, the Rogue says he needs to find someone who knows exactly what happened when the Vex invaded Gallifrey for the first time, someone who was there. He explains they need to find the Soretti Rogue. They visit the Skeletti archives in the far future, whereby Hanson finds in the deepest, darkest section, not allowed to be seen by anyone but himself, the same Time Lord books that Unipishtim was looking at. This scene, by the way, would be intercut with that one in the actual episode. The Rogue studies them and finds a recount of the events of the Panopticon episode Doctor. The Rogue looks at the author's name, which is in Gallifreyan writing, but he translates it as Unipishtim. The three of them then go to the TARDIS, where the Rogue sets the controls for Theatre 3 around 1200 years in the past. They soon arrive in the middle of the capital village, bustling with life, sparkling in the sun. The Rogue's TARDIS has disguised itself as a van. Hanson says they're in the capital city of the Skeletti, just after it was built, and remarks how much it's changed. He takes him into the government's building, which still stands 1,1200 years later, whereby they request an audience with Unipishtim. The receptionist says he doesn't want to see anyone often, and she doesn't know where he is. They then go on to meet with the president of the Skeletti, Ajakos. As any mention of Unipishtim's name is flagged up, so Ajakos speaks to the Rogue, Hanson and Riley. They end up telling Ajakos about the future and that they're here to try and save the Skeletti's past. Ajakos eventually concedes taking the three of them to Unipishtim. The storylines begin to converge here, as the Doctor, Sally and Pete land in the village on Theatre 3, having followed the Rogue's TARDIS, and then they follow the Rogue, Riley and Hanson and Ajakos as they leave the government building for the Free's base. The main scene we get here is of the Rogue, Hanson, Riley and Ajakos meeting Unipishtim, Shamash and the crazed Isaiah, whereby the Rogue confronts Unipishtim and says he needs him, as he's worked out that he is the Soretti Rogue. The Doctor, Sally and Pete just watch from afar. However, Unipishtim just laughs in the Rogue's face and tells him that it's entirely wrong, and that he was in fact once known as Cordell. The Rogue says it's impossible because she became Connie and then the Doctor, to which we see the Doctor nod to just as confused, but Unipishtim clarifies saying that he was Phaedra's replacement, the second Cordell, and when the Skeletti started their voyage, he took a senior position and became Unipishtim. The Rogue looks confused and asks whatever happened to the real Soretti Rogue then, but Unipishtim just smiles and gestures to the crazed Isaiah in her cell, completely maddened and out of her mind. Unipishtim explains that she went crazy and has now been a shell of herself ever since, but Isaiah says out loud that the Doctor can come out now, to which the Doctor reveals herself. And then, as I said, they have all now been reunited. They can get to business and stop this dreadful business from ever happening in the first place. We then crash zoom on the Doctor's face before cutting to the end credits. This episode is the final episode of the season and picks up from where the last one left off, with Asaya, or the Seretti Rogue, galvanising everyone together to avert the creation of the Vex once and for all. This episode builds up as Asaya orders the others to take the Doctor back to her TARDIS so she can take over and lead along with Hanson the mission. But then, when they get to the TARDIS, standing in front of it looking dastardly smug and turning the entire episode on its head, stands the Rani. He says he's disabled both TARDISes and they'll only be able to enter once all this business is put to rest. Both the Rogue and Asaya erupt with anger at the Rani, but he says he doesn't care. He also says that he thinks the Doctor will agree with him on this, but perhaps they just need to talk. From here onwards, the episode becomes very peculiar for a Doctor Who season finale, and spends the rest of its runtime intercutting between several duologues between all the characters so they understand what the other wants, and what even they want themselves. The two-handers we cut between are the Doctor and Rogue, the Rogue and Asaya, Unipishtim and Asaya, Unipishtim and Shamash, Hanson and Riley, Riley and the Doctor, the Rani and the Rogue, Riley and the Doctor. Also, in addition, once all of these scenes are over, we have a further scene with the Doctor, the Rogue and the Rani, while there's intercut with Unipishtim, Shamash and Asaya, both discussing where to go from here. In these scenes, which take up a good 40 minutes of the episode, everyone is persuading, through several narrative and character devices, that the best way to move forwards is to make the future better. Hanson agrees to leave the past alone, while Unipishtim and Shamash agree to let Asaya out and reform the three, opening up to the Skeletti gradually, which Unipishtim stresses only gradually, to their past. The Rogue agrees to begin again with the Rani, as he wants to help rebuild Miasmagoria with him. Everything seems fine and okay, but then, as the Doctor, Sally and Pete return to leaving the TARDIS, Riley runs after the Doctor in tears, pleading for the Doctor to help her to take her back, but before the Doctor can say anything, Pete shoves her to the floor, pushing her over and saying that she is not coming anywhere near him again. The three of them go back into the TARDIS as it dematerialises and leaves Riley there on Theater 3, stranded. Inside the TARDIS, the Doctor confronts Pete, angrily telling him that he had no right to do that, and they should have at least given Riley a chance. The whole thing turns into a massive argument, resulting in the Doctor throwing Pete out the TARDIS, taking him back home, as she's lost faith in him. Sally kicks off, saying that was unnecessary and cruel. The Doctor won't have any of it, working herself up, finding a lot of unrepentant anger and lashing out at Sally. Sally just looks at the Doctor in disgust, saying that maybe she did the wrong thing after all, and maybe if the Doctor hadn't interfered with things, it would be better. Sally then storms off, leaving the TARDIS and the Doctor in anger, disgusted at her behaviour. The Doctor sits down in the TARDIS, alone and isolated, as a tear rolls down her eye. She speaks to the TARDIS, saying she had to do it, and maybe she was selfish, maybe the universe would have been better without the Vex ever existing. The TARDIS beeps and the Doctor admits that maybe she stopped the plan, because if the Vex hadn't existed, then she would have died during the events of Doctor Who Endgame, and for good. We take time with this scene, lasting a full 5 minutes before, as the pace slows down, the Doctor is at her lowest, crouched on the floor. A teleport signal erupts into the TARDIS as a strange man stands there, shocked. The Doctor stands up, quickly confronting him, and he says his name is Daniel Bevan, and he needs her help. Before we cut to end credits and the caption reads, the Doctor and Daniel will return at Christmas in The Martian Equinox. So there we have it. Season 51, and it was something, I'll give you that. So, the Doctor now is on her own, and broken character-wise, with only the company of a strange man played by Pierce Bronson. And what will happen in that Christmas special? Well, you'll have to wait a little longer, as the Elysium Season 3 is up next, and there seems to be a new cast member now in the form of Riley Baker Mitchell. So until the next time, goodbye.